Welcome to Art Book Nook. My name is Kay and I review art and craft books. Today I'm going to review the Complete Watercolorist Essential Notebook. This is actually a compendium of two books, the first being the original Watercolorist Essential Notebook and the second being dedicated to landscapes. This review is part 2, focusing on landscapes, which is the second half of this compendium. I decided to split the video because it is two separate books just in one, and you'd have lost the will to live listening to me drone on for over 45 minutes. So anyway, let's not waste any more time. Let's get on with looking at what Gordon MacKenzie has to say to help us with our landscape painting. We have acknowledgements from Gordon and his thank yous, and a dedication, and also a little bit about Gordon MacKenzie, the author. Unfortunately, Gordon MacKenzie sadly passed in 2024, but we're fortunate he's left us this incredible legacy, and for that I will always be truly grateful to him. The table of contents tells us this book is split into 3 sections: medium tools and techniques, composing a landscape painting, and landscape elements, which looks at painting water, painting skies and painting the land. I'm really excited to get started. In the introduction there are some lovely words from Gordon. He explains what to expect from each of the 3 chapters, but also says, "I'm sorry if you bought this book thinking you'd become a full-blown artistic wonder overnight just by reading it. Art is about doing. It takes practice and lots of it. To assume that every piece of paper you use will end up as a masterpiece is like assuming every time a violinist picks up the instrument, he or she will perform a flawless concerto." Gordon says this book is only a stepping stone, a doorway to a reference point, and it's up to you to move forward, and he wishes you good luck and good fortune on your creative journey. That's lovely, isn't it? So here we are, section 1. This chapter is a summary of the medium tools and essential techniques and procedures you will need for painting in watercolours. Before we begin, we have a few encouraging words from Gordon, dispelling the myth that watercolours are hard and difficult. They're not if you understand a few basic tips and techniques. We then continue with pigment characteristics and a bit about pigment numbers, and Gordon has provided an overview of what this is all about. Paint manufacturers love to entice you with exotic names such as Windsor Blue or Rembrandt Blue. These tubes of paint are made up of pigments, and each pigment has a specific number. Gordon advises you to shop by numbers. So if you have, for example, Talon's Rembrandt Blue, Holbein Antique Bronze Blue, Winsor & Newton Windsor Blue, or Schmincke Brilliant Blue, you actually have a tube of phthalo blue, which is PB15, and the same can be said for all the colours. Gordon has also listed pigments to avoid, and on the right hand page there is a very handy paint quality chart. We have an overview of different brush types, fibres, sizes and shapes, supported by instruction how to hold your brush correctly and how to make different marks. With watercolour, how wet or dry your paper is and how much water is in your palette or on your brush is critical. Understanding this will alleviate a lot of frustrations that people have with watercolour paint. There will be many occasions with watercolour when you may wish to fade out or soften the edge of a coloured area, for example clouds. The eye is always attracted to hard edges, and we can use this technique to make the viewers see only what we want them to see. Gordon explains step by step how to create a graded wash, which is a wash that changes in hue, value, temperature or intensity from one part of your painting to another. This can either be monochrome or it can be a combination of several colours. He tells you what to look for when choosing a palette and how to recognise good quality paper. Negative painting is where you paint around a light shape with a darker colour. To improve your chances of success, Gordon has given you detailed step-by-step instructions supported by one of his beautiful paintings where he's used this exact technique. Masking is a method we can use when we want to preserve a light area within our painting. This could either be the white of the paper itself, or it could just be a lighter colour. For larger shapes you can use tape, and for tiny details you can use masking fluid, and also a combination of the two. With watercolour you don't just need brushes, you can also paint with palette knives and paint with a sponge and obtain some very interesting effects. The following are a handful of textural and blending effects that you can achieve with watercolours once you learn how to control the processes and use the tools discussed in this chapter. Starting from top left to right, we have dropping water into damp paint, fading out with a sponge, dropping wet colour into wet colour, sponging on texture. On the right hand page we have splattering on paint, moving and removing colour, applying paint on a partially wet surface, negative painting, applying paint with a palette knife, lifting paint with a damp brush. Gordon encourages you to try these and experiment on your own. This brings us to the end of the first section in this book. Before we proceed any further, I'd like to remind you that this book that I'm reviewing is a combination of the two books you see on the screen. It's literally two books that have been put in a compendium together. So, Watercolorist Essential Notebook, it covers everything that you've just seen in the first section of Watercolorist Essential Notebook for landscapes, but it goes into much greater detail with more examples and step-by-step demonstrations. So if you buy this book, the complete Watercolorist Essential Notebook with the butterfly on, you will in effect get both books together in one book. I hope that makes sense. It's very confusing, I know, and I've confused myself with it as well. But that's the book you want. And if you've missed my video, part 1, Watercolorist Essential Notebook, I've put a link in the description below. Right, I hope that's cleared it up. So without further ado, let's carry on with Composing a Landscape, section 2 in the Essential Notebook for the Essential Watercolorist Notebook for Landscapes. So how do you go from being a painter to an artist? Gordon explains it's less complex than you think really, and that composition may seem like a mysterious bunch of contradictory and confusing picture-making rules concocted by a bunch of obscure dead artists or obtuse live ones, but it doesn't have to be. But what if you make a mistake? Well, Gordon says, so what? You're probably the only one who'll ever know or even care. To begin on this journey, this transition from painter to artist, you begin by building up your own database of reference material, by taking your own photographs and creating your own sketches. Gordon has provided lots of tips and advice to help you plan a composition, and he shares a secret with you. The speed at which you proceed from painter to artist depends on 3 things: your painting frequency, your painting frequency, and your painting frequency. The more you paint, the faster you grow. It's that simple. So that's very good advice, I think. What I like about Gordon MacKenzie is his writing. He has a sense of humour, and this clearly comes across in his books. The characteristics of the paint in your palette are very important. The effect of a pigment rather than its colour, and Gordon urges you to really get to know and understand how the paints in your palette will behave. Here is a handy colour wheel indicating the relative placement and temperature of the paints Gordon used, and he has used the trade names such as cobalt blue, phthalo blue, etc. So you can see where they're placed on the actual colour wheel itself, which is really handy. And at the bottom is an example of how he used to lay out his paint palette. We have some guidance on choosing a colour scheme and an excellent explanation of how to paint the different qualities of light, such as bright sunlight, accent light, slightly hazy light and completely diffused light. It's possible to control different types of light in your painting by controlling the shadows, detail and colour saturation. In light effects, Gordon teaches us all about the different directions of light and the effect they have on a subject, such as direct overhead light or skylight, side lit light, front lit light and backlit light. and also some help about choosing the colour temperature for creating atmosphere and mood, and there's a handy reference table to help you. Perspective is all about creating the illusion of distance and height, and Gordon explains the difference between the eye level line and horizon line, which is a common mistake people often make, and illustrates with examples the various ways that surface pattern can lead the eye around your painting. If you struggle drawing perspective, why not use a model? Gordon explains how he's used a model when drawing a butterfly or a bird. The human eye is attracted to movement, so when it comes to dynamics, it's not what you paint that creates the energy, it's where and how you paint it. And there are 3 examples on this page of a forest or a wood, where you've got trees that are vertical like sticks, then you've got trees that are lightly angled, and trees that are twisted and heavily angled. Which one do you think creates the most movement? Which picture do you look at the longest? On the left-hand page, we have 3 examples of Gordon's paintings containing lots of movement. When it comes to contrast, this is the primary way that the brain distinguishes things. The stronger the contrast, the more it attracts attention, and vice versa, which is why we're always attracted to hard edges, and also why we're attracted to dark colours against light and vice versa. We can use this to our advantage in order to lead the viewer's eye around our work. On the left-hand page, Gordon explains what he calls the magic of proximity, and this is something that I've never considered before, so I've really learnt something here. I'm going to read it to you. When colours are in close proximity, they tend to exaggerate each other's difference. For example, I can make one colour appear much lighter by making its neighbour darker. For whatever reason, the brain wants to create maximum contrast between everything it sees, and this can work to great effect in your painting. So to lighten a sky, darken the trees, clouds, hills, or whatever is in front of it. You can often achieve the changes needed in a colour by doing just the opposite to its background or adjacent shape. At the bottom of page 3 are some really good examples of how Gordon has done this. The small square in the centre of each larger square is exactly the same colour. It's just the background colour, the adjacent colour, that has been changed. I think magic is a really good word to describe this. When you're learning something new, your progress isn't always linear. Sometimes you go up a step, plateau for a while, and then make another step forward. In order to break this deadlock, Gordon suggests trying something different, such as incorporating an image or a ticket or something into your work, like a collage. One artist I met said he liked to paint the same scene in different mediums: oil, watercolour and pastel. Or you could try painting the same scene using a different colour palette, or painting the same scene at a different time of day: early morning, midday, late afternoon and early evening. In section 3, Landscape Elements, Water, Sky and Land, this chapter examines, one at a time, choices or variations you can use within the 3 major aspects of a landscape painting: the water, sky and land. The examples and exercises in this section will enable you to handle any of these elements when it becomes a dominant player in your picture. Each element is covered in a lot of detail, so let's make a start by looking at painting water. Water can be one of the most complex elements you can add to a painting, but it can also be the star that steals the show. It can play so many roles, from a tranquil pond to pounding waves. There are a wide variety of techniques involved that you can apply that are specific to water. We begin by making waves and practice making brush marks to mimic the effect of waves and their perspective. And here is a step-by-step demonstration from Gordon to show you exactly how to create the effect of waves within your painting. So we begin with a background, and then we create swells, and then we add actual wave marks. We look at wave direction and surface patterns of water. And the secret to painting realistic water is to have the waves and ripples appear as though they're following a consistent pattern. This also involves a bit of perspective. Often, the flow of water is interrupted by islands, rocks or points of land projecting out into the stream. The next time you're near a large body of water, pay attention to the flow. You'll be amazed at how much you see when you're looking for something specific. Here we have a demonstration of how to paint sparkling waters and how to paint sparkling water with mist coming off the surface. Ripples are the marks made by light breezes on a calm surface. Gordon has found that using packing tape in combination with masking fluid creates the best effect. He also warns you to test your paper first, stating packing tape will not work on some brands of paper, and that Arches is one of the best brands recommended for this process. And we have a lovely image of the complete painting. You can actually see where the packing tape has been applied to get those lovely strong horizontal lines across the painting, and where masking fluid has been applied lower down. The combination of the two techniques creates a really realistic effect. It's just lovely, isn't it? When it comes to working with water, there are 4 hard and fast characteristics of reflections that we need to use in order for the water to look authentic. Number 1. On a body of water, a reflection is always directly below the thing being reflected. Number 2. The reflection is rarely the exact same as the object being reflected. Number 3. The length of a reflection in calm water depends on whether the object or plane is tilted towards you or away from you. The reflection gets longer and wider when the object or plane is tilted towards you, and shorter and narrower when the object is tilting away. Number 4. Reflections become elongated when the surface of the water develops ripples. Each wave acts like a tiny moving mirror that is able to reflect objects over a greater area of the water. The result is a reflection that is much longer than the object. We have a step-by-step demonstration of how to paint reflections in calm water. Here Gordon shares techniques for dynamic water. There are many ways to paint moving water, from wave swells to crashing rapids, and the next few pages will show the main techniques. Starting with wet in wet, then dry brushing, using partial washes and then adding colour and laying down the water. We have examples of painting waterfalls, calm reflections, and also depicting ice. I'm really excited to try out the techniques on these 2 pages for sea spray. Active water crashing into land often produces spray, and this evidence of energy in nature can add a note of excitement and energy to your paintings. Here are 2 ways to create that dramatic effect, one with rust sandpaper and one with masking fluid. I honestly think this section of the book is worth the price of the book alone. When painting rapids or waterfalls, it's a good example of how we often get better results by painting what the picture needs, not what we actually see. Rapids and waterfalls have a lot of mid-value and dark-coloured water. Add to this the darkness of the rock, sand or silt that it passes through, and you may find your pristine water looking more like a sewage outflow. This is another example of Gordon's sense of humour. Note where Gordon has used hard and soft edges. In this step-by-step demonstration, Gordon teaches us what he calls big water, large crashing waves against rocks. Active water often produces foam and bubbles that create interesting patterns and movement on its surface. We have a step-by-step demonstration here of how to mimic that, and we have a very interesting exercise showing you how to paint whitecaps, also known as white horses. Gordon uses a rope made from paper towel to lift off colour in the shape of the whitecaps by pressing it firmly onto the painted surface with both of his thumbs. Look at this wonderful painting by Gordon. It's called Superior North Shore, 11 by 19 inches, 28 by 48 centimetres, an example of using the masking fluid technique when painting breaking waves. I think it's beautiful. Over the next few pages, Gordon explains how to paint objects that are under the water. both looking down into the water from the surface and actually being under the water itself. This brings us to painting skies. I enjoy painting skies. Every time you do it, it's different. And here are 3 examples of painting wet in wet. We've got mottled wet in wet, wet on damp with sky holes, and wet on dry with sky holes. To create drama in our skies, we need to achieve dramatic contrast and keep the clouds dark, preferably along a light horizon. To create a moonlit painting, we can use a similar wet in damp technique to paint the clouds, but to preserve the moon, we can cut a circle of packing tape. And let's not forget the technique we used when we were painting sparkles on water, using sanding paper. And we can give clouds a 3-dimensional form by fading out the bottom of the clouds. There are 2 techniques for painting billowy clouds. If you look at the clouds in the photograph top left, you'll notice that in some places the billows are light against a darker background, and in others dark against a lighter background. Each is painted in its own way. The first step-by-step demonstration is how to paint light billows against a darker background. And the second is how to paint dark billows against a lighter background. A graded wash makes for a wonderful sky on its own, or can be the start for many others. Sometimes lifting and removing paint from a picture is the best way to achieve results. It is possible to capture the gossamer nature of the northern or southern lights by lifting paint with a flat synthetic brush. Have you ever seen clouds like these? They are extremely rare due to the very specific conditions needed for them to appear. They're often referred to as rainbow clouds, but the correct name is nacreous or polar stratospheric. I've only ever seen them myself just once. They were shimmering, they were like mother of pearl and very iridescent. Just imagine how wonderful it would be to paint a sky like this. Here are a few more tips from Gordon how to paint skies and clouds. With a big well-loaded brush you can drop down a heavy mass of dark paint and then spray and tilt to move the paint around. You could also paint a nice background and then drop water or paint into it. This part of the chapter examines various aspects involved in painting the land. There are a few ways to handle this common landscape feature. In most of the examples below, the rock area is textured or patterned in some way. One of the most dramatic effects to apply to rocks is reflected light. To do this, you need to blend cool and warm colours on the shadow side of the rock. Gordon states the problem that most people have with making trees is that they are still influenced by the icons for a tree that they developed as a child, and it's time now to look at trees with a more critical eye. Over the next few pages, Gordon demonstrates how to tackle the different types of trees that you may wish to paint. For example, deciduous trees in winter, painting deciduous trees in leaf, the different styles of branches, such as sharp and angular branches or smooth flowing branches, and painting coniferous trees. There are some lovely examples on the right-hand page where Gordon has used a sponge, brushes and palette knife. Here Gordon explains how to paint palm trees, which is really helpful for those of us who aren't lucky enough to live in a warm climate, so we don't get to see them growing. And in this demonstration, Gordon explains how to combine techniques to create the effect of a meadow, and we revisit the negative painting technique to help us to paint this field of ferns. We have some really good examples of how to paint different types of bark on tree trunks. When you look at a forest, you only see the hint of individual trees. So to paint tree lines and seasonal forest scenes, all we need to do is lay down some colours that all merge into each other, and then we just add detail with 1 or 2 individual trees, and that's sufficient. And here are some more examples. Painting trees in winter and summer greens. And when you would like to paint a single tree, this exercise, lighting in the forest, will help you. What follows now is a lovely series of step-by-step projects for you to try. These projects will incorporate all of the techniques that Gordon has explained in this lovely book. So we've now reached the end of part 2 of the complete Watercolorist Essential Notebook, and part 2 covered landscapes. This compendium of 2 books covers the Watercolorist Essential Notebook and the landscapes. I've put a link in the description below to part 1, but the book you want to buy, if you want to buy both books together, and it's really good value, is the book with the butterfly on the front of the cover. I can't believe how much detail and information is contained in this compendium. I think it's such a valuable asset to have in your art library. Sadly, Gordon MacKenzie passed away in 2024, but how fortunate we are that he has left us this incredible legacy. There is limited information available online about Gordon MacKenzie and his lovely work, but I've managed to find several resources, and I've put links to those in the description below. So what do I think to the complete Watercolorist Essential Notebook? Gordon described it as a treasury of watercolour secrets discovered through decades of painting and experimentation. I would agree with that. The book is very comprehensive, full of technical detail, but written in a style that's easy to understand for beginners and more experienced watercolourists alike. I've certainly learnt a few new things from reading Gordon MacKenzie's book, so I definitely think it's a worthwhile addition to your library, whether you buy the books independently or whether you choose to opt for the compendium, which is excellent value for money. In any event, I've put links to all 3 books in the description below for you. I hope you found my review helpful. If you did, please give this video a like. It helps YouTube promote my channel to other people who are interested in art books. I try and post a new art book review every single week, so if you'd like to see more reviews from me, please subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. And if you found this review helpful, please leave me a comment below. I do reply to all comments. And if there's an art book that you'd like to see, let me know and I will do my best to review it for you. So thank you for watching, and until next time, happy painting.